Welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my preview for the 2024 Las Vegas Grand Prix. So finally back into the swing of things in F1, back for our final triple header of the season after what seems like our fifth break of the season. So really good to be back in F1. Of course, unfortunately, only be for basically 2 weeks as we have this triple header and that's the end of the season. But let's get this preview underway. So first, as always, taking a look at the last year's race. So last year's podium, of course, won by Max Verstappen, second Charles Leclerc, and third was Sergio Perez, rounding out the podium. Now, in terms of big moments from last year's race, really things got going before the race even got going when in free practice, Carlos Sainz ran over a manhole cover in FP1. Basically, if you weren't watching that race or that free practice session, what happened was the F1 cars of these ground effect cars, but even in 2019, a similar incident happened with George Russell in Azerbaijan. But the downforce generated by these F1 cars is so great that basically it sucked up the manhole cover that was, on a regular street in Las Vegas, basically sucked it up and it smashed into the bottom of the floor of Carlos Sainz's car, causing tons of damage. I'm pretty sure they had to replace the chassis, replace multiple components as well. End result was that Ferrari was basically given a 10-place grid penalty for Carlos Sainz's car, despite the fact that it wasn't anything. It wasn't Ferrari's fault, wasn't Sainz's fault, and it was basically a fault of the track itself. Now, of course, that meant that Sainz, who basically qualified P2, very good qualifying performance, was forced to start in P12. Now, when the race did get going, it was pretty contentious at that first corner. Verstappen had a really good start, pushes Pulsar Charles Leclerc wide at that first corner. Stewards deemed that he had overtaken Leclerc, pushed Leclerc off track, so he was given a 5-second time penalty. Other big moments from the race, Lando Norris crashed out early on, going through some of the high-speed corners in, I think, Sector 2. That, of course, brought out the safety car. After that, Verstappen, who had to serve his 5-second penalty during his first pit stop, came out pretty low down the order, and that meant that he had to fight his way through the field, and that meant that when he came to George Russell, pretty good tussle there between the two drivers, and it did lead to minor contact between the two of them at the penultimate real corner on the track, as illustrated in the picture here. Now, of course, the big moment from last year's race that everyone remembers is, of course, Leclerc's overtake on Sergio Perez on the final lap of the race. Was a pretty special overtake as it came from so far back. And, the fact that this has happened to Perez 2 races in a row was a bit damning, as Alonso had done this on Perez the race before in Brazil, and then again losing a place on the podium, or basically losing a place on the final lap. Again, for the second race in a row was definitely not ideal for Perez. Now, taking a look at the track itself, rundown from this starting grid to turn 1, very, very short. And again, with cold tires, cold brakes and everything, there definitely is a possibility for incidents to happen. As we saw last year, we saw Alonso spinning. We saw Sainz also turned around the wrong way. I think he also clipped someone. So that was his race ruined even further after the grid penalty hurt him there. And then you get to kind of the end of Sector 1. You do have that short straight with the DRS zone as well. And that overtaking spot at turn 5 did provide some overtakes last year. Then, of course, you get through to Sector 2. You get the sphere with that weird chicane. And then you have the 2 high-speed corners before you get to the end of Sector 2. And that's where Verstappen and Russell had their scrap last year. And then, of course, you have Sector 3, which is basically just 2 long straights with one braking zone at the end, which of course is where Leclerc overtook Perez last year. Now, looking at some stats about this track, 6.201 kilometers. We are expected to have 50 laps on Saturday. Yes, Saturday, not Sunday. Fastest lap, race lap record of 1:35.490, and that was, of course, set by Oscar Piastri last year. The average speed of that fastest lap, 234 kilometers an hour, which ranks 8th out of the 24 tracks that F1 is visiting this year. For downforce rating, it's a 0.93, so a 0 is highest downforce, a 1 is lowest downforce, so definitely leaning more towards low downforce, which makes sense with those very, very long straights. There are a number of corners there, but generally mostly slow speed corners, so the downforce isn't as important for those kinds of corners as it is for, say, high and medium speed corners. Cars will be going full throttle for 78% of the lap, and the pole conversion rate for this track is 0%. Of course, that's kind of an irrelevant statistic, as we've only ever had one race at this track, and that was, of course, last year, where Leclerc started on pole, but of course did not win the Grand Prix. Taking a look at the schedule for this weekend, Thursday, FP1 6:30 in the evening, FP2 10 in the evening, and the temperature for FP2 is expected to be around 10 degrees and clear. For Friday, FP3 6:30 in the evening, and qualifying 10 at night, with temperatures expected to be 11 degrees, and again expected to be clear with some potential cloud cover. Then we get to Saturday. Grand Prix starts at 10 p.m. local time. 15 degrees is expected to be the air temperature, so a little bit warmer than Thursday and Friday, but not by a whole lot. It will still be pretty cold, and again, weather is expected to be clear with perhaps a little bit of cloud cover. So again, be careful that it's not your traditional Grand Prix Sunday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, simply because it's the Las Vegas is in one of the most western time zones on the planet, and because it's starting so late at night, it would be unreasonable to have the traditional Grand Prix schedule, as that would mean that the Grand Prix would be starting Monday morning local time. Now, moving on to the tires for this weekend: soft C5, medium C4, and the hard C3. Just other comments on the tires. It'll be, of course, tire warm-up is going to be really key. It'll be interesting to see which teams struggle with tire warm-up, really struggle in qualifying, struggle at the start of the races, or perhaps on the start of a stint, and which teams are able to get the tires up to speed relatively quickly, given how low the air temperatures and how low the track temperatures are going to be. Because the track temperature is going to be pretty low, graining is also going to be an issue, so that's another thing to watch out for there. Now, normally this is where I would be talking about best qualifiers and worst qualifiers at this track, but we've only ever had one race at this track, so it's kind of irrelevant. It would just be talking about who had the biggest qualifying gap to their teammates last year. So instead, we're going to be talking about championship permutations for the World Drivers' Championship, as this is the first race where Max Verstappen could mathematically win the championship. So Verstappen leads right now 393 points, Norris second 331. Those are the only two drivers who can win the championship, with Norris 62 points back of Verstappen. There's 86 points available going into this weekend, and after this weekend there will only be 60 points available. So Norris must outscore Verstappen by 3 points for the title fight to move on to Qatar. Now, finishing up with some predictions for this weekend, I'm actually going to go with Charles Leclerc Ferrari win. I think the fact that there's lots of long straights, quite a few slow speed corners, those are both characteristics that the Ferraris have generally done pretty well at, and Leclerc, I thought, did a really good job last year to split the Red Bulls on the podium. So again, generally he does quite well at these kinds of street circuits. Second, I'm going to go with Lando Norris. I think even though the characteristics of this track won't suit them as much as perhaps Qatar will, I still think the McLaren will be a very, very good car. So I think Norris should be able to get a podium. Rounding out the podium in third, I'm going to go with Max Verstappen. Perhaps a bit of a long shot for this, as I do think that if I'm saying that Ferrari and McLaren are perhaps better cars than the Red Bull, then I think Sainz and Piastri are also going to be in the mix for the podium. But I do think that I'm just picking Verstappen to get that final spot on the podium, as I think he's generally quite consistent, did a very good job here last year despite his shenanigans at turn 1. So there you go. There's my preview for the 2024 Las Vegas Grand Prix. Hope you're looking forward to the weekend. I'm looking forward to it a decent amount. I'd say out of the last 3 races, this is probably the one I'm looking forward to the most, as I think the racing here is probably the best out of the 3. And again, the fact that it's a street circuit means that there will be an element of jeopardy that there realistically won't be at Qatar or at the season finale in Abu Dhabi. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.